We're proud that we're, for the first time ever, able to connect government investments to good wages. That's never been there before, having those strings attached that we're going to give supports and incentives to tackle the climate crisis only if there's guarantees for good wages, good pay, and support for union jobs. Like, that's something that's never been done before, and we're proud of that.
All right. That's Jagmeet Singh, of course, leader of the NDP, praising the budget, at least that part of the budget. Tom Mulcair is standing by. Tom, what is he referring to specifically in there?
Well, this is a long-standing request of people who look at sustainable development writ large. If you're going to be helping companies, it was tried during the pandemic. You got money to help companies survive, fine, but look to see whether those companies are using, for example, offshore tax havens. Look at their behavior on the environment. Look at their social responsibility scorecard. There's actually a terminology for this these days. We call it the ESG rating, which is environment, society, and governance. So look at those things. So this is where Trudeau's heading with this. So this is part of the green budgeting that he's got. Now, of course, Singh is right to say that this is a very important change, but I don't think it's going to reflect on the NDP. I think that Trudeau knew what he was doing when he showed up with that bright green tie yesterday. He was branding this budget as a green, environmentally friendly future of the change in the economy, all that stuff. This is what he was trying to brand himself with. I'm not sure the NDP is going to pick up too many points thanks to it.
Okay, so we know this budget is going to go down. Yes, the Conservatives are going to vote against it. The Bloc said the same thing today. Plus, ça change. So here we are again. What's the fallout here?
Well, what I found interesting today is that the Conservatives were rather subdued. They were on to one of their other themes today, crime reduction and things like that, law and order, classic right-wing themes. That's fine. But they seem to have realized that the bet that they had that Trudeau was going to try to play to their tune. So they were saying, more austerity, reduce spending. Trudeau, as we talked about yesterday, just went all in and said, no, I'm going to keep spending like a drunken sailor, and it doesn't matter how much of a deficit we run up. Look at what we've already run up. This is chump change in comparison. So he's just going with the flow, saying, I'm going to be the guy who's more left than I've been in the past. Try to talk to some of the NDP voters and let them know that this guy Poilievre is really what he portrays himself as. He's scary. He's dangerous. We don't like him. And by the way, don't split the vote. Don't vote for the NDP this time. So he's got to hew a little bit more to the left. We'll see. The place that's going to decide this election, as usual, is the Greater Toronto area. Some 50 seats in that area. 26 of them are sitting MPs in the city proper. Two of them have, had for various personal reasons had to leave caucus. But overall, if Poilievre starts making inroads with the many and diverse cultural communities in the GTA, watch out, he could become a real player. If Trudeau manages to hold on to all of that, nobody's going to beat him, including Poilievre.
Okay, here, speaking of this I was going to say the little guy. I don't know what you're
referring to him.
I'm sorry. Speaking of that guy, here is Poilievre's reaction. Tom, you can tell me what you think.
Today's budget by the costly coalition of the NDP and Liberals is a full frontal attack on the paychecks of hardworking Canadians. It equals $4,200 per family in new government spending. That's more inflation, more taxes, and more costs for everyday people.
Okay, so what did he do? He divided 38 million Canadians by a $40 billion deficit, and that's how he came up with that?
And then he does, instead of going by individual, he goes by households. But nobody's paying attention to that.
Yeah.
No.
Trudeau had this figured out in the 2015 campaign. I campaigned on balanced budgets. Trudeau said, I'm going to run up deficits. And people said, we don't care, run up deficits. So we're at $1.3 trillion of national debt right now. Just per annum, we've got $50 billion of interest that we have to pay out. That's more than what the federal government pays in healthcare to the provinces. Doesn't matter. People are not there right now. They're saying, Trudeau's taking care of me. He's sending me a check for $467. Let's round it off to $500. He's sending me money to help with my groceries. It says right in the budget, it's called the grocery check. It's actually a GST rebate. But the other thing that he's on about, like Poilievre is constantly nattering about the carbon tax. Anybody who knows anything about the environment knows you have to put a price on carbon. It has to be either through a cap and trade system or a carbon tax or a combination of them. It doesn't really matter. The important thing is the result. We have not got the result in Canada right now. It's proven that Canadians really don't mind paying the extra money, but it's not having a real effect on reducing carbon. So that's another huge problem for Trudeau. But at the same time, almost all of that money gets returned by another rebate check. So the average working family is going to be getting their GST check, and they'll get their carbon tax rebate check. That's the way the system was designed. So the more Poilievre says this is a horrible thing, the carbon tax, the more people look in their mailbox and say, here's my carbon tax rebate. I just got a bunch of money from the government. Why does this guy Poilievre want to take this away from me? So he's not thinking this through to the next level. He's behaving like a third-year high school student who's having a debate, and he tries to cherry-pick his arguments, but it falls flat. The average person is looking at things saying, no, I like the fact that Trudeau wants to send me some money for my groceries, and it's a very primary reflex, but it's the real one that's happening right now.
All right, let's talk about your column in the Gazette today and the big healthcare reform announced by Quebec Health Minister Christian Dubé today, all 300 pages of it, Tom. And I think, judging by your column, you're having a bit of deja vu. We're headed for another flop here.
I'm worried about it. And my main test of this thing is going to be where they situate this. They're always comparing it to Hydro-Quebec. Where's Hydro-Quebec located? Oh, that would be on René Lévesque Boulevard in downtown Montreal. Maybe that's one of the reasons for its success. The ministry is located in Quebec City. It is the worst ministry in the government of Quebec. Full stop. I'll have an arm wrestle with anybody about that anytime. It is the worst ministry. The greatest group of incompetents that have ever been put together in the government of Quebec. And I've worked for decades in Quebec City. So the only way anything is ever going to change is if you set this thing up and you set it up in Montreal, it's got a fighting chance. There are several problems with it. A lot of the introduction, a lot of the stuff he's talking about is only going to be rolled out over several years. That gives the forces of resistance and inertia lots of time to organize. He says he's taking on the unions, but I don't think that the unions are up for this fight. They want better salaries for their members, better conditions. This whole bit about a single employer, it's so long overdue that I think that the unions, and I've worked in the union sector. I've worked as a senior, an elected official in public service unions. I can tell you that the public service unions know how to read a room. They're going to look at the public and say, we're going to be completely offside. We're not going to have a war over this. Get better conditions for our members. We'll go along with the single employer, which is basically a way of saying that there will be seniority within the whole system, not within one establishment, something that's long overdue. So that's one of the best things that Dubé has brought in and he talked about today. What are some of the other problems? Well, for the English-speaking community of Quebec, it's another punch in the nose because we don't know all the details yet, despite the 300 pages and 1,000 articles. It'll really depend on how they define things. But what do you do with the board of directors of a big hospital that's serving the English-speaking community? Think the big McGill Hospital. Think the Jewish or St. Mary's. What do you do? What happens to that board? It's going to be basically subsumed by this agency. What about the independence? What about the ability to do hiring and on the basis of taking care of your community? And what about the foundations that have been there for not just decades, but for generations, taking care of the buildings, making sure that they can get the little extra because it's the community giving money to the establishment that they like. So I think that that's something that hasn't been thought through. I know that nobody who did the drafting of this thing had that at the top of their minds, but I think that the English-speaking community better be taking great care to make sure that this thing isn't another slap. I mean, already with Bill 10, I think it was called at the time with Gaétan Barrette, there was a loss of some of the autonomy. We've been through Bill 96. We know what that meant. Legault's tried to go after the English language school boards, and then he replaces the French boards with these service centers, and then he's trying to centralize them even more. So if this is just another exercise of bureaucratic centralization to Quebec City, it'll be a total failure. If it's set up properly and it's in Montreal, and we can have really good people doing the proper job of managing this thing, it has a fighting chance of really improving the system. But you've got to think about things like the one I just mentioned, the effect on the English-speaking communities, institutions, and nobody's talking about that.
Tom Mulcair. Tom, thank you so much.